Hello everyone, and thank you for joining me today. As promised in the last video, I will be discussing more concepts related to the schema therapy and schemas in a general sense, which might manifest themselves as blockages to our self-expression, for example, or blockages to our ability to derive satisfaction from life. So, in this video, I want to cover the subject of our needs. I think understanding where our needs come from and obviously how to meet them or why we are not able to meet them can help us to kind of progress in a direction of being able to master ourselves, to master our behavior to at least some extent, so that we are not bound to these unconscious processes in a way that we are being led towards situations, relationships, or places which are not very beneficial to ourselves. So how can we understand what needs are? Obviously, each of us has a different understanding. We know that we need to eat, for example, in order to survive. According to theories from Gestalt therapy, needs manifest themselves as disturbance to the physical, spiritual, and mental equilibrium. So if you imagine an organism, or simply a human being, which obviously is an organism, the body itself, on a physical level, strives towards a process called homeostasis, which means that it wants to maintain an equilibrium in terms of, for example, temperature or the amount of hormones in a system, and what sort of hormones need to be produced and manifested in order for the organism to function properly. So when there is a disturbance in this equilibrium, we experience a manifestation of this disturbance, which we could call a need. So for example, when we run out of nutrients, we're going to experience hunger, and we want to simply eat something in order to not only gain these nutrients, but obviously get back to this state of equilibrium. So the whole process is quite simple. We first start from a point of being in this equilibrium or balance, internal balance. Then some element isn't working properly or requires something from the outside world, or perhaps simply isn't functioning as it's supposed to be functioning. It then signals the body that something is wrong, that the body itself isn't anymore in this balanced state. So we start to experience a need, for example, a need for food. And obviously there are many different needs, which I'm going to explore in a minute. So when we experience this need, we're going to start feeling motivated towards obviously meeting this need. So in that case, in this very simple example, we're going to reach out for food. Once we get our need met, we're going to experience satisfaction, and we're going to forget about the whole disturbance because we're going to go back to the equilibrium again. So from a Gestalt perspective, the need stands out from the background. It's a Gestalt that we start to perceive. And because we perceive it, it becomes important for us, obviously, on this conscious level. And we're simply going to start paying attention to it in order to understand it and perhaps remove it if it's something unpleasant, such as hunger. Now, we know that there are many different physiological needs, which I'm not going to go into because obviously if you are here, you are alive and therefore you are able to meet these basic needs, such as hunger. But what I want to explore instead is our psychological needs, our emotional needs. And according to schema therapy, these psychological needs are called simply universal core emotional needs. As a whole, as an organism, we not only have the physiological aspect that we need to maintain in order to stay healthy, but we also have this psychological health, this mental health that needs our maintenance. And it simply follows the same principle as the physiological part of our body. It wants to maintain an equilibrium, a balance where our needs are satisfied, our needs are met, so we can simply remain psychologically healthy. But when our psychological needs aren't met, then obviously these needs are going to be manifested as these disturbances, as something that we need to pay attention to, something that occurs in our life over and over again until we're going to meet this need so that we can go back to this equilibrium. Now, in schema therapy, there are 5 basic categories of this psychological needs, of this emotional needs. And the first category relates to simply security, safety, stability, respect, empathy, emotional support. So it's all about being safe in this world, being able to connect with other people, feeling safe. In a way, focus on yourself without feeling threatened by the environment all the time. It's the ability to trust other people, to gain satisfaction from relationships. And if we are unable to meet this need, if this need for safety and security and respect and connection with other people is unmet, then we're going to experience problems such as, not feeling safe, not feeling like we are belonging here, not feeling like we are part of the world and the society and other people or humanity as a whole, or maybe even the universe. Depends on how far you want to describe this. Now, the second need, or the second category of needs, relates to our autonomy and competence. So we want to feel like we know what we are doing, or at least feel that we are capable of learning, that we want to learn, that we want to feel like we have at least some mastery over ourselves and over our environment. So, for example, we want to feel like we can do stuff for ourselves. And I think it might be related to the concept of something like dignity, where you don't rely too much on other people to do basic stuff for yourself. But for example, you can eat by yourself, you can go out by yourself, you can do shopping, you can take care of yourself. This spectrum actually stretches towards more and more complex tasks, such as you start from a basic autonomy in regards to, basic care of yourself. And then you progress towards more complex issues, such as being able to maintain a job, being able to study, to, learn something, perhaps gain new skills, and so on and forth. So when we are unable to meet these needs in this category of autonomy and competence, we might feel like we are very dependent on other people, or perhaps that we are not capable of caring for ourselves, and we need other people to do it for ourselves. And perhaps we might have problems with self-esteem, where we believe that maybe we are not competent enough, maybe we are not good enough to gain new skills, to learn something new. The third category of this universal core emotional needs relates to responsibility towards oneself and others and goal orientation. So these needs relate to being able to function as a member of the society in a general sense, in a way that we need some sort of limits so that we can, for example, postpone the instant gratification in order to meet our long-term goals. So we don't indulge ourselves constantly in this very spontaneous behavior and very hedonistic drives that we might have. So we need this sort of limits in order to keep ourselves focused on the future, as well as to be able to function in the society so that we are considerate enough of other people so that we can maintain some sort of relationships at least, and we don't take advantage of other people, for example, or we don't do anything at all costs that might satisfy ourselves but will hurt other people. Now, if we are unable to meet this needs for having some limits, for feeling responsible towards ourselves and others, then we might be struggling with things like impulsivity, being unable to maintain a schedule, for example, or being unable to commit to certain goals, to make commitments in relationships. And generally, perhaps such individuals could be described as, being eternally in the present so that they don't foresee consequences of their behaviors because they don't have these limits in their life. They don't know how to put limits into their behavior. So obviously that's going to have some drastic consequences, such as not being able to meet long-term goals, not being able to maintain jobs, not being able to move forward in life, and so on and forth. Now, the next category, the fourth one, is about self-directness or simply self-focus. So being able to take care of yourself, to make time for yourself, to do what feels right, something that enables you to develop new skills or simply help you to feel better about yourself, such as knowing how to deal with your emotions, knowing how to comfort yourself when you are in distress, and so kind of displaying some compassion towards yourself. When we are unable to meet this need for self-directness, we usually tend to focus on other people at the expense of ourselves. So, for example, we might ignore our needs just to avoid conflict with other people. Or, for example, we might be codependent in relationships where we sacrifice our needs constantly, which obviously leads to resentment and further problems. And the last category of needs relate to simply spontaneity and playfulness. We simply need some time to have fun, to do something that allows us to not take life as seriously as it usually might appear to us. So we have this need to simply let go of our responsibilities just for a second, just for some time, in order to allow ourselves to experiment with different things in our life, to experiment with new experiences, because obviously that aids us in our learning. That's how we learn and gain different experiences, gain new knowledge. And when we can't meet this need for spontaneity and playfulness, we probably might feel quite numb or bored, or like we are not having any purpose. Perhaps we might lack energy in life. Everything might seem pointless, or we don't know how to relax. We might be very stressed out. So these are the 5 basic categories of this universal emotional needs. And just like with physical needs, if we are unable to satisfy these needs, if we remain in this state of deprivation or frustration where basically our mental health is out of balance, we gonna experience certain consequences of this unmet needs and of this basically unbalanced state of mind. So I think the consequences obviously will relate to each individual person. Some people might have a lot of needs related to, for example, connecting with other people and being a part of the society. Other people might simply have less needs in regards to this area. So again, each individual is different. But the point is that the reason why these needs are called as being universal is because each single person has these needs, which helps them to maintain the proper mental health, the mental balance, the psychological balance, which enables them to function, to fully function in the world, so that instead of focusing on their needs, they can focus on the external world, on exploring and learning and having these different experiences. Now, generally, the Gestalt cycle of experience describes this cycle of meeting our psychological needs and generally our needs quite well. Basically, the cycle starts from getting a sensation that something is wrong, something is out of balance. Let's use a simple example of an individual who has a need for autonomy and who goes through all this Gestalt cycle in order to meet this need. That individual repeatedly has a problem with a computer, let's say, and they're not very good with computers, or maybe they're simply not very invested in learning about how to fix this problem, so they rely on their friend to fix their computer. Now, after a few times, they start to get a sensation that they're not very comfortable with this process anymore, that perhaps they should start investing more time into learning about computers so they don't have to be dependent on other people. This ability to gain the sensation and then awareness of this particular need is the very start of the Gestalt cycle. Now, once they get the awareness that they have this need for, okay, I want to do it by myself, I don't want to rely on my friend anymore, they can start planning their action. So the next stage of the cycle is called mobilization. They start to gain resources on how they can start repairing their computer by themselves. For example, they might do a research on Google, they might read some books, they might ask some other people about different things about computers. Now, once you feel that you have enough resources, you can move on into the action point of the cycle, where you actually take an action and attempt to satisfy this need. So in this case, you're going to try to fix your computer by yourself because you feel the drive to be autonomous and competent in this case. Now at this point, it doesn't matter. It truly doesn't matter if you can truly fix your computer or not, but the whole point is that you took an action towards meeting your own need. Now, after an action, if you're satisfied with the result, if you acknowledge the fact that you've done what you can in order to be autonomous and competent in this case, you acknowledge the fact that, okay, I'm satisfied with what I've done. I'm satisfied with taking steps towards learning. I'm satisfied with taking this action of fixing my computer. So once that happens, you simply experience satisfaction and you can move on to other things in your life. So the gestalt of this need for autonomy simply disappears because your need is satisfied. Now, I think this is actually amazing because once you realize that whatever is in your field of consciousness in this moment, over the next, 10, 20 minutes after watching this video, you will notice certain parts of Gestalt. Maybe you will notice the whole Gestalt, which is composed of all of these different parts, but usually you will notice certain parts, and these parts will signal to you which Gestalts are important at this moment of time, and at the same time will signal to you which needs do you need to meet in order to restore your psychological health into balance, unless you are obviously perfectly balanced already, which is fine. But generally this drive to meet our needs, it never finishes, because even if you satisfy your need once, it's going to arise again and again. Because for your organism to remain dynamic, to keep moving, to be full of energy, it has to keep changing. And by doing these changes, it goes out of balance, and by satisfying your needs, you come back into this balance. So you basically move between these different points. That's how the organism can keep moving and keep being alive in a general sense. Right, so the whole process wouldn't be so complex if not the fact that at times this whole gestalt of our experience becomes interrupted so that we can't fully meet our need. For example, we might become aware of what we need, that perhaps we want to call our friend, maybe we feel lonely, perhaps we want to learn something new, but we are not moving further, we are not doing anything about this need because we experience some blockages. Or maybe we get to a stage of mobilization where we gather all our resources and we start planning for the future, but we end up not taking any action because again there is some blockages. Now, there are obviously blockages related to Gestalt processes, processes described by Gestalt psychology, which are related to things like social norms. For example, something might feel like not being socially appropriate. We might feel maybe embarrassed about doing something. We also might get some interventions from our morality. Maybe we feel it's not right, maybe we feel it's wrong, maybe we feel like it's not good. And lastly, the last blockages might come from our schemas, and that's where I'm going through all this video actually. Gestalt psychology actually has I think there are 7 blocks related to different stages of the Gestalt experience. I'm gonna post the link to them in the description, but I'm not gonna go into them in this video because I'd like to focus on this schema theory, as I've promised in our last videos. That's where we're going into. As I've explained the last time, schemas are these patterns of beliefs, of interpretations of our feelings and behaviors. Schemas themselves are not really, in a way, driving our behavior. They are not controlling our behavior, but rather the problem becomes what we do with that schema. So our responses to the schema will determine whether we are able to meet our needs. And as you might probably guess, all of the schemas arise from the fact that our needs were not being met in the childhood, were not being met by our parents, by our society, by our peers. So basically we were not taught how to meet our needs, how to develop different responses and behaviors that will help us to meet our needs. So because of the schemas, which will prevent until adulthood, unless we realize what's going on, we're gonna suffer some consequences in adulthood because of the schemas and because of this inability to meet this basic emotional needs, this universal core needs that I've described before. So since Gestalt psychology is widely used in schema therapy as well, and there are lots of techniques that therapists use in order to help their clients to move through this Gestalt cycles of experiences, schemas will intervene with these cycles at different points. For example, if you have a schema of, let's say, emotional deprivation, where you feel that or you think that other people will never be able to connect to you, you are not being able to connect with other people. Having the schema is not itself very wrong in this context, but our response to it. So for example, if you submit to the schema and you simply accept the fact that nobody understands me, you will not be able to meet your need for connection and respect and empathy because there's this schema. So you'll not even be able to become aware of the fact that you need to connect with other people, that you really need it to maintain this psychological health. I'm not going to discuss all schemas in this video, but I just wanted to give you an idea as to how the schemas arise. And before going into theory describing all of the schemas, I wanted to explain first this universal basic needs, because if we can't understand these needs, we'll not be able to understand where the schemas are coming from, because schemas are ultimately manifestations of this unmet need. So I hope I'm going to be able to cover all of schemas in the next video. I might split it into a few parts, I'm not sure yet. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.